Put my headphones on 1 sec.
Okay. All right. Are you all ready to start? I didn't want to
I'm all ready.
okay.
Yep.
So how are y'all doing? I just wanted to thank
Good.
you first of all for joining me. I love the series. I already plowed through all 6 episodes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. So
Thank
great
you.
work.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I guess the first thing I was curious about when you approach a project with this scale, like where do you even begin? And I can't even get my mind around like working on something for 10
Mhm.
years at this scale. So
Yeah, we get asked that a lot. I mean, I have had the privilege of working with Ken for 28 years, David for 12 of those years. This is not the first really big topic that we've bitten off. So we have a little bit of the apparatus and the understanding and the kind of infrastructure to do something this big. That doesn't mean we don't gulp really and kind of feel like we're both in a sprint and a marathon every single day all day long. But we start by obviously raising money and creating the infrastructure to make a series. It's 6 feature-length films, but then we have a few dedicated periods of production. We do research, then we're shooting, then we're editing, and then we're in post production. But actually, inside of those 4 phases, we're all doing everything. So we're constantly learning and reading and thinking, and trying to put as David always says, the many thousand different puzzles that we have to fix every day. And Jeff Ward is always writing. We're always learning from our interviewees. We're always bringing in more archival material. And then the really set period of time when our editors are on our payroll and they're cutting the show, and then we have to actually finish it and make it look and sound beautiful and make sure we have all the legal permissions to use everything. But um, it's a big task, and it's a lot of logistics as well as a lot of artistic decisions and a lot of academic and historical ones all put together.
I know, first of all, I'm just a huge fan of your body of work in general, but this Florentine film is a little bit different than past ones because you guys approached it with reenactments, which you'd never done before. How early in the process was that like settled on that you were going to do
So,
that?
you know, um, the last film I worked on with Ken was a shorter biography of Benjamin Franklin, and I'm
Mm.
so glad I got to make that. We got to make that film for so many reasons. One of them is it got me into the 18th century a little earlier, and I could be thinking about the American Revolution, knowing that it was coming up, grabbing all sorts of stuff, being excited about telling the story of 3 million people and not just one really extraordinary individual. But part of what happened while making that film was realizing here's a man who was a printer by trade. Well, how do you understand the operation of a printing press unless you see it in motion? And how do you see it in motion unless you have a costumed interpreter moving their arms and all of that? Um, so that kind of I don't know, broke first blood in a way. We recognized that we could do that impressionistically without you thinking that those are Franklin's hands. This is just how this works. And in order to tell the story of the American Revolution, a war of the 18th century that's so different from a 20th or a 21st century war, you actually do need to feel human presence and what they're actually doing. You need to see boots in the ground and the mud. You need to understand that in order to win the Yorktown campaign, they have to walk in the heat of summer from New York to Virginia, and not just them, they have to bring animals with them, and there's women and children following the armies as well. You need to understand that the munitions of war are handmade. You can see bullets melted into shape. You can see women washing clothes or making clothes in the first place, men mending their own clothes, people cooking, people in campfires. You really need to understand the human effort that goes into that, and you just can't without the reenactors. So we are so thankful to them for how generous they were. We worked with them both on and off camera for years and years. They became to trust us, and we really trust them. They live this history, and we couldn't have made this film anything like it is without their commitment to the history and getting it right.
Yeah, I think that's something that I noticed as an audience member with your project is how alive everyone felt in the story.
Mm,
Like you don't get that a lot with documentary, especially
mm,
something like you've touched on as like the Revolutionary War. It feels so detached from anything that we know,
mm,
just across the board with how we do warfare, the way we dress, the way we live. And I think this documentary does such a wonderful job of making everything feel lived in, alive. And one
mm.
of the major takeaways I had just from the get go, I love history, but for whatever reason, I guess I never knew the women and children followed
I
along
know.
in war.
It's a real big takeaway of the series. We hear everywhere we go. Not only, I mean, I think I've said this a lot, obviously the woman and the four of us. But I women are always at the heart of any story of war. I've always thought if I made thematic films, I would make some kind of a film about women in war. They make extraordinary sacrifices. Obviously, they lose their sons and their husbands and their sometimes their fathers, but they also have to reinvent themselves and rise to the challenges and opportunities in front of them. And then before they had the right to vote or any rights at all, they're making huge decisions and contributing to the boycotts, the war effort, the getting the word out, helping clean up the wounded, bury the dead, taking care of the children on their own, taking care of their homesteads, traveling by foot. Even Martha Washington goes on the road. So I think it's a lesser known story. It's also very infrequently depicted in renderings of the American Revolution, which is fascinating, even over 250 years. One of the reasons we had to shoot the beautiful sequence in the opening of the women doing laundry is because we couldn't find any archival representation of women doing laundry or being with the soldiers. And so you're right to point that out. And yet it's such a central part of what happens in the revolution, and they are more than 50% of the population. So um, it's interesting, and women are just as important in the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. It's just it's women at the heart of everything. And as Tim O'Brien says, when we were making Vietnam, you need to go to the wall and think that behind every name there's a mother. And I think one of the things that gets left out of the revolution is that we're standing on the shoulders of military sacrifice here too.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
also,
That's
it's also unlike our 19th century, sorry, unlike our 20th and 21st century wars. It's fought in the United States. New York
mm,
City's occupied, Boston's occupied, Savannah, Charleston, Philadelphia. If they're half the population, this war is everywhere in those populations. And we thankfully have a lot of their testimony because a lot of women could write. They could write really well. And we have a really talented group of actors who were willing to read for us those voices. So we got them. We got to put them out there. We're really happy to have the opportunity to do that.
the cast is incredible. I mean, you always seem to have like incredible casts doing the voices, but this one it was like particularly fun to be like, is that
Yeah,
Morgan Freeman? you know?
right. Yeah.
Um, so was there any cast member who read that you were like, man, that's better than I could have even imagined?
Uh,
Yeah, 61 of them.
yeah, it happened all the time. And every time somebody came in to read, we were totally blown away at how good they are, and then kind of pinching ourselves that we were going to give them any direction. But you I mean, Matthew Reese, Kenneth Branagh, Tobias Menzies, Maya Hawke. I mean, you just said Morgan Freeman. It's Alden Ehrenreich. It's insane.
Mm.
We pinched ourselves every time we had to go into a session. Yeah.
It was really fun, and I think they had fun too. This is not their normal work, and I think it was interesting for them. It's scripted, sure, but it's real. Like the character wrote their own dialogue. I think they really enjoyed that.
I particularly liked Josh Brolin. I thought that was an
That
interesting
is
choice for George Washington.
That's all Ken. We had trouble casting George Washington, and we had several amazing actors read that part actually, and nothing was feeling quite exactly right for a number of reasons. And Ken was flying home from Europe and watched Dune 2 and landed and called and said, I think we should try Josh Brolin. We went, oh my God, imagine if we got Josh Brolin and he not only came in, he hit it out of the park. So it's really great.
It kind of reminds me of like how you guys approach the cinematography or shooting the reenactments. It's impressionistic. Like
Yes.
you don't expect him to do a voice. You don't expect it's just Brolin, but for whatever reason, it's perfect.
Well, we'll pass that along. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I was curious. Was there any like things you learned about some of the bigger figures, the mythic figures that we read about in the books that you didn't know going in that kind of floored you?
Many, many things. I was thinking about this yesterday. George Washington is probably the most famous person in American history, certainly up there. And I don't know that I could have thought of anything that he said top of mind. And I don't think any people could. If
Right.
they could, it's something he didn't actually say, like I can't tell a lie or I chopped down that cherry tree, right? Um, but as you just pointed out, Josh Brolin was able to read more than any other character. George Washington's voices are in this film, and they're good. You know, like he had some really profound thoughts, and they're not just, his general orders are pretty stirring. This is your chance to stand like men and all that. But he's also writing home at the same time to his brother, like, I don't think we're gonna win this. That sort of thing is just wild to me. He is famously opaque. He tries to keep himself from being knowable, not just to the people around him, but to history. But I think we got something out of him, and I don't mean us, the filmmakers necessarily, but the people who have surfaced this history, and then us surfacing particular parts of his vast body of letters that he left behind, have surfaced something in him. This character that was adaptable, and as one of our talking heads says, there's nothing more important in an insurrectionary figure than to be able to adapt. I love that about him. And he also knew from the start that he was going to be the head of the military, but he agreed that the military was going to be subordinate to Congress and kept that throughout his whole career, not just in the military, but then later when he rejoined politics. He's really sets a great example.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always fun in a big series like this to take the people we've all heard of, or in a series like Vietnam, take the famous photographs and newsreel images that we've all seen or listened to and make them bigger, put them in their historic context, layer them with the complexities that are obvious if you think for 2 minutes, but not passed down in our mythological understanding of history. So it's always fun to kind of bust open and make the heroes or the big bold face names people more complicated and more familiar and more like us and more human. But then it's also just as fun to tie them to the lesser known people who are impacted by their decisions.
Mm. I think for me, one of the big ones that I was like, I'm so glad they gave that character a more rounded like history because I just didn't know it was Benedict Arnold.
Mm.
Yeah, for
That
real.
one is fascinating.
You got to understand how amazing he was and how important he was to
Mm,
understand the betrayal.
yeah,
And then you
yeah.
got to understand that part of the betrayal is also he falls in love with a woman. The loyalist cause is very real. He feels underappreciated, scorned, neglected. You have to, again, these mythological things when you really put the history around them get way more interesting.
Yeah, people are fighting in this war for all sorts of different reasons. And sometimes that's ideology and sometimes it's opportunity. And I think with Benedict Arnold, it was both at
Mm.
different times. And I think that's pretty fascinating. But it's not just him. There's 3 million people or so within the borders of the United States at the time of the war. And all of them are impacted by it directly, as are millions of people beyond the borders of the United States.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's towards the last episode maybe where you have a talking head. I think it was a historian from France where she talks about how big George Washington is in France. Like it
Yeah.
makes sense to a degree, but like it's not something that I would ever even consider.
Right, that's Iris DeRoche. She's a young, wonderful scholar who is actually Dutch, but she's an
Mm,
expert in the French part of the story and very interested in a French general. So she um, we met her halfway through editing the film, and the first time we talked to her, David and I thought, oh my God, we need to interview Iris, and she's wonderful presence in the series, and been a total trooper as we've been making the film. So I appreciate. It was really fun when she says he's huge everywhere, and he's huge for all kinds of reasons you don't think about. One of them is, military leadership. Like monarchies comes from your bloodline rather than your life's work. So it was fun to see how the French understand and understood George Washington.
Somebody was telling me today that he always comes out of the movies we make feeling like he's got some homework because there's so many questions he's asking himself while watching and wanting to learn more. And I think that might be, for me personally, something that I want to know more about. Like, okay, so these French aristocrats are seeing something special in this American aristocrat because they don't think he's an aristocrat. He's just a farmer, even though he's wealthier than they are, probably. And then he becomes the head of a Republican institution. They're willing to fight for it, and a lot of them are going to lose their heads within the decade in France. Like I want to know about that, and I don't yet. So
Mm,
maybe the next 10 years I'll be doing that.
that's
It
fascinating.
won't be. I'm getting out of the 18th century.
Yeah.
That's one of the other like fascinating things about the story is how our revolution, the American Revolution started this like domino effect, the spread of seeking for democracy. And that's something again, like you just don't learn that, or at least I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, when Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnamese independence in 1945, he's got American officers standing next to him, and he's
Mm,
quoting the Declaration of Independence. He's quoting Thomas Jefferson in Vietnamese. Like, yeah, he later became an adversary of the United States, but the ideals are universal. And I
mm.
think that that's worth understanding and understanding how they came about and what their impact was in the time, and then consider what they still mean.
Yeah, there's this fascinating little like nugget. Well, I mean, it started throughout the whole series, but there's a point where the I forget who it is, but they're talking about uh, revolutionary things, and one of the talking heads, or it might even be the narrator, says, the people on the sidelines listening to this are the slaves,
Yeah, it's
and
Jane
that
Kamensky's saying that. Yeah.
okay, that to me again, with this project in general, how you guys highlight figures and people that are not normally highlighted, especially in the American Revolution. That in particular, I thought was a wonderful moment.
The people like Patrick Henry, who are saying no to slavery, we don't want to be enslaved. They know the condition of slavery firsthand.
Mm,
That's the worst thing that they can imagine for themselves. It's not entire like there's something to that. And also, while they're saying it, of course, they understand the system that they're operating under is fraught with trouble. They don't know how to get out of it, but it begins stirring some thoughts in a lot of people's minds. And for some people, the American Revolution was their opportunity to try to fight their way out of slavery.
Mhm.
Um,
mm,
I think that that's really cool, and it's
hmm.
something I didn't know. And
Yeah,
it's people who
that
fought with and against the United States who are using
Yeah,
this
I
war
mean,
as an
you're
opportunity.
right. And the founders and the Brits were manipulating that idea.
yeah, that too. Like, I love the amount of time that is spent on humanizing loyalists and
Yes, very
just
important.
yeah, absolutely, because like, in school, at least when I was in school, it's been almost 20 years at this point, but when I was in school, everything is like black or white. It's like, oh, they're oppressive and we're fighting for freedom. But the reality is, and you guys show so perfectly, is that no, there's everyday people who are living in the colonies or the states, and they just want it to be done with. They don't even care necessarily.
Yeah,
Right? The
absolutely.
war was brutal, and what does it have to do with us? And I think we sometimes feel that today. And so, anytime you make a film again about war, you need to put the choices, the things that come down to us as myths and kind of cartoons and very simplified into context to create space for empathy, for understanding, for learning, for using history as both a tool for learning and as a warning and an inspiration. And I say that without suggesting that there isn't right and wrong and good and bad and things about human nature that don't require great sacrifice, and that I'm not really happy that we won, and it's not a great story that you can feel really patriotic about at the end. But you need to understand all the bumps and bruises and complicated pieces along the way, and to have understanding for why people might have done what they did, because it helps you understand both the world around you and the people you're around.
Absolutely. That I'm sorry, go ahead.
The
So we're
historian Jane Kamensky, who you were referencing earlier, who talked about um, the ideas of liberty being leaky, right? And that people are picking this up even if it's not the intention of some of the initial writers of the words. She also says in our sixth episode, basically, that the thing that draws her to studying the American Revolution most is how much it is about possibility and about how everybody is seeking possibility in this struggle. I think a lesson there is that this is, the American Revolution is a period of intense uncertainty, but in that uncertainty, there's possibility. Nobody knew how this was going to was going to turn out, and it turned out entirely differently from how anybody could have imagined in April 19th, 1775. I mean, they're not talking about independence. They're not talking about the United States then. They're not talking about a continental republic. That stuff comes out of the revolution. It's not the impetus for the revolution. But there's other people who are fighting against that, who are imagining different possibilities that didn't come to fore. And I just think there's something to that. If we live in an uncertain time, and I think we do, maybe there's possibility in that too, if we're willing to do the work.
Hmm. I put out to some of friends of mine that are big fans of yours that I told them I was talking to you all, and I asked them if they had any questions they wanted to ask you. And one of the big one I got multiple times is, what echoes of the past are you seeing today? I got that across like 4 or 5 people. So
Yeah.
You
I'm
know,
curious.
Sarah, you can go.
I mean, I think I'll answer this two different ways. One is because we made the film over such a long period of time, the echoes and the resonances and the parallels and the things that seemed so timely keep changing, and actually they change every day. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing that is really important, and I think is a takeaway, and maybe you would agree, is that we were really divided at our founding. We've been divided every time we've come together to celebrate the American Revolution. I think we need to appreciate and lean into the fact that we are a divided people. We are not a monolith. We do not agree with each other, and we never have. And we need to understand that that's part of the American experience. And then the third real takeaway, which I hope viewers take and all your listeners and readers and people interested in the history take away, is that citizenship, as George Washington says, is the highest office in the land. And we owe it to our fellow Americans not to yell at each other, but to quietly and dignified way vote in our public school board election, in our state and local elections, not just pick up our head every 4 years. The founders worried about making sure that no branch of government had too much power, that the government represented the needs and the rights of the people. And we need to remember that regardless of your party.
Yeah, think that you definitely come away with that. For me as a viewer, that I took that, and also like I know I've already talked about George Washington, but it's impossible not to keep going back to him. I think what is so fascinating about him as a figure in general is that if you just look at his like military, the way he fought, or his the battles that he participated in or led, he had a lot of failures. A lot of
Yeah.
failures.
Yeah.
He wasn't necessarily the greatest general in the world, but what set him apart from all the others was the way he bounced back from everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's maybe not one of he might not be one of the great generals, but he's definitely one of the great commanders,
Mm,
possibly the greatest commander. It's really hard, as a lot of people say in the series, to imagine how this could have worked without a single individual, him. And there's all sorts of reasons for that, you know, you might find your own reasons in the film. Actually, I think that's one of the great things about having 12 hours to work with
Mm,
is and having 10 years to work on it, is that there's a lot there that's going to feel different to individual people, as the war meant something different to every individual. And then there's a lot that you might, if you watched it again, I'm sure you'd have different takeaways. And some
mm,
things you might not agree with your first take, or if you watched it in 5 years or 10 years. If I watched, the first film I worked on the Roosevelts, if I watched that now, it would feel I would have totally different takeaways just because of who I am now, and what my country is like now and all of that. So, that's our goal, is to tell something that is going to last longer than just now. It's not made for the 250th anniversary. We're kind of happy that it is because people
mm.
seem particularly interested in that. Um, but it's hopefully something that people are going to be able to turn back to for a long time. This is American history. Americans know that the revolution matters, but I think Americans also know that they don't know the history of the revolution. So I think there's a real thirst for that information, and we're really grateful that we are able to offer some of it. And hopefully people engage with it, and hopefully, like I said, that they go from that and start looking up other stuff and digging deeper and learning more about this country that came before them, people who lived 250 years ago and since and before, and history matters.
Yeah. I didn't know if you wanted to talk, Sarah. I keep feeling like I'm going to cut in
No,
and
no, it's all good.
interrupt.
It's great. Totally great.
Um, yeah, no, that's wonderfully put. And I think you guys came about just the right time, not just because the 250th anniversary is coming up, but also just again, like the way our country is feeling right now. I think just all of it seems to be coming to a head at a good time for this.
Hmm.
And I can only speak for my readership over at military.com. I've been writing all kinds of things across all different kinds of topics, but I did write one piece about this upcoming docuseries, and it's one of the most popular things I've written on the site. So I definitely
Wow.
think people are hungry for this.
It's
Yeah,
a great.
not just in terms of the calendar of the month. Thanksgiving's coming up, right?
That too, yeah.
Right? And there's not that many safe topics anymore. There's the sports and there's the weather, and they matter. But here's something that really matters that we all share. It's our shared history. This film was made for everybody. This history involves everybody. Everybody has something to see in it, see themselves in it, because these people are just like us. Um, I hope people watch it and share it with their families and talk about it, or take the advantage of having a few days off around Thanksgiving to
Mm.
watch it. Um, I think that there is a thirst for it, but I think a lot of it is just we want to know what happened.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's great. I mean, the piece is great and it's wonderful that it's getting that kind of attention. I think we want to kind of transcend the moment that we're in and bring as many people to the broadcast, to the streaming as humanly possible over the course of the 12 hours for everyone to come away with their own personal either connection to the history, the things that matter to them, the things that they didn't know, the resonances, and again, to hopefully have a different kind of pride in the nation and the country.
And even if they don't, it's one heck of a good
Yeah.
story. So, I, as always says, it's really unlikely what happens,
Yeah, it's
one
the
thing
great
after
underdog
another.
story.
I think
Yeah.
people are gonna get a kick out of that.
I think it's definitely something that I'll speak for myself that I don't think about enough is like you think of history as like this set in stone thing you read. It's like, yeah, of course that's how it happened, but at any time anything else could have happened and more than likely probably should have happened than what did. And that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
I was talking to Christopher Brown the other day, and he was pointing out that there's actually a lot of different outcomes that could have happened between total victory for the Americans and total victory for the British. And what's most unlikely, perhaps, is that it was pretty much total
Mm,
victory for the United States. So for it to be that much of a triumph for what George Washington was fighting for, he might be right that it was a standing miracle. There's other
mhm,
outcomes where, there's still something independent about the United States, but
mhm.
it happened the way it happened, and that's really all we can do is say what happened, not what would have happened. But it is kind of a fun thought exercise.
For sure. Uh, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up we've talked about representation in this
Yeah.
series, but one of the big ones that I think is important to highlight is the native people.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I will say I am embarrassed and feel a little cheated that I knew as, very little about how central and important and ultimately tragic what happens to Native American communities in the American Revolution is. It's not to them, but it is to me. And I hope we can begin to correct that, because I think our country, because of the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement and all kinds of things that have happened in the last 250 years, have some better understanding about race in this country, slavery, and we don't, I think, have enough of an appreciation of that you can't tell American history, you can't be an American without understanding the whole history of Native Americans who had been here long before we were, and displaced and big losers in the American Revolution. So, and also fought patriotically on our side and valiantly on the side of the British. So I think I hope it's wonderful that that's a takeaway for you. It was certainly a takeaway for me working on the film. David knew a lot more about that history because of what he studied in college, but
Mm.
I feel an obligation to our fellow Americans to bring that history to light.
And I'll just add that the American Revolution was so many different things, but one of the things it was a fight for the future of North America, and people knew that at the time. And so there's a lot of Indian people, individuals, and nations that are making choices in this war to defend their own sovereignty and their own independence. Um, and we know a lot of what certain people said and thought during the war, that lived in Indian country. Now, because of the great work that historians have done since the revolution, and more, and even more in recent years, digitizing the Haldeman records, for instance, in Canada, um, you know, that's a major part of the revolution. George Washington sends an army into Indian country. It's something he's thinking about. So we are grateful that those documents exist, that we can bring light to, part of the story that we don't often hear about. But we're really grateful we have 12 hours. Like, you can't, so much of our culture is reduced to a paragraph, and that's just not appropriate.
Mm.
Um, there's too much story here.
Mhm.
There really is, and I'm glad you bring that up about the sources that you had for stuff like this. If someone wants to read more up on like native people that were
Yeah.
here before, what are some
Mhm.
things that we could look to?
There's a
Well, the,
book called The American Revolution in Indian Country by Colin Calloway that's from the early 90s, I think, or mid 90s. There's a book called Native Nations by Kathleen Duval, which is a survey history of Native North America.
that just won
Um,
the Pulitzer.
it just won the
Mm.
Pulitzer. Ned Blackhawk's
Oh, yes.
book, I believe it's called The Rediscovery of North America, I believe. I can double check that. But his book a couple of years ago is also a survey of Native North America. And I believe Michael Whitkin, who we also interviewed, is working on a book. It's not out yet.
Yeah, the
Mm.
Rediscovery of America is Ned's
Rediscovery of
book.
America, excuse me.
Um,
Michael
yeah.
Whitkin's book is going to be called I think the war. I don't know if he has a title, but it's not just the American Revolution, but it's the war that led into the American Revolution, which we often call the French and Indian War, or the Seven Years'
Mm.
War, and then the war that followed the Revolution, the War of 1812, which another one that I know really little about and can't wait to read his book and learn some more.
Were you going to say something, Sarah?
No, I think Kathleen Duvall, Colin Calloway, Ned Blackhawk, Michael Whitkin's upcoming book. Those are all great resources to learn more about the Native American
And
experience in
Kathleen
the
also
18th.
wrote a book, a really great book about the history of the American Revolution on the Gulf Coast, called Independence Lost.
Mm.
Um, we, we had her talk about some of her research for that, for the scene in episode 6 on Bernardo de Galvez and his war for Pensacola. But that book also features, I believe, Choctaw and Chickasaw characters from the interior Southeast. Um, and she's a really great writer.
And all of Alan Taylor's books incorporate this piece of the story into the history as well.
Well, I know my TBR is going to be massive because that's all super fascinating. Um, I guess before I let you go, because I want to be cognizant of your all's time, what is something that my viewers, specifically like military individuals or veterans, active duty people, might take
Hmm.
away from this, or you hope might take away from this?
Well, they probably know a lot more about the military story of the war than certainly I did. But one of the things I think we're trying to do in the series is remind Americans that this was a war, a terribly brutal, long, difficult war, and that fighting a war in the 18th century against the climate and the topography with the bayonet, with disease, and that we stand on the shoulders of sacrifices that have been made by Americans since our founding. And we need to honor their service, honor their contributions, make good on what they sacrificed and died for. And I mean, I hope your viewers who serve in the armed forces, who have served, feel that we have done a good job of highlighting the military history that gave us this nation. And as Rick Atkinson always reminds us, even his first fight is, you know, what are you willing to die for? And who fought the war, why they fought it, and how to honor them.
I only want to say that I think they might see themselves in some of these characters, and one above all, who's Joseph Plum Martin, who
Yeah,
wrote, in my opinion, the best book about the American Revolution and his own experience. He wrote it well after he served, but it and he even references this. You know, he compares himself to Alexander's soldiers, but he's a grunt, and some of the stuff he says, you know, same things being said by Roger Harris at Cantien in Vietnam. Um, so I don't know. Hopefully, you see yourself in some of these experiences because I think there are universal truths to war, and
that's true.
I guess I say hopefully, but it's pretty pretty unfortunate too. Um, yeah, I hope we did a good job with that.
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I thought it was wonderful. And uh, again, incredible work. And I definitely saw myself in some of this, but I did come away thinking like, I don't know if I would have chose to be a loyalist. Like, I don't know if I would have been on that
It
side.
I personally, if you ask me, I think I would say it depends on who I was, where I was, who was around me, all of
What
Yeah.
that.
stage of the war?
What stage of the
Yeah.
war? I mean, I think ultimately it became the fight for the ideals that we originally thought it was, but I don't think that was necessarily the case at the start. And
Hmm.
if something happened to your family, once I did something to your family, you might choose the other route. And certainly the odds of who was going to win changed over time, which probably would have factored into my calculus as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Well, is there anything that I didn't ask or that you think I should include in my piece
No, thank you.
about?
You've been so thoughtful,
Thank you
really.
so much,
Oh,
Ryan.
Yeah,
I
thank
really
yeah,
you.
thank
appreciate
you.
your thoughtful viewership and questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking your
Thank
time,
you.
and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
You
Thank
Bye.
you.
too.
You too. Bye.
Bye.